Cleopatra VII, the last ruler of the Ptolemaic period of Egypt. She was born in 69 BCE and she died in 30 BCE. She was 39 years of age. Cleopatra VII was joint ruler with Ptolemy XIII in 51 BCE at the age of 18 years of age. There was famine in Egypt due to low floods. Egypt owed the Roman Republic 17.5 million drachmas, a loan which was taken up by her father. 50 BCE, civil war breaks out between Ptolemy XIII and Cleopatra VII. In 48 BCE, Pompey arrives in Egypt after his defeat at the hands of Julius Caesar. And unfortunately, the Ptolemy faction murder him and cut off his head. A month later, when Caesar arrives, he is presented with the head of Pompey. Caesar orders Ptolemy XIII and Cleopatra VII to cease all hostile activities and start disbanding their armies. Caesar brings Ptolemy XIII and Cleopatra before the Alexandrian Assembly and reads the will of Ptolemy XII, naming both of them as heirs to Egypt and co-rulers. Caesar proposes that Arsinoe IV and Ptolemy XIV become co-rulers of Cyprus, and Cyprus will be returned to Egypt, and Rome would return this province to them. The Ptolemy XIII faction marches on the Palace of Alexandria and lays siege to the palace. Caesar only has 4,000 Roman troops to defend their position. Arsinoe IV joins the 20,000 Ptolemaic troops and she is declared the Queen of Egypt. In 47 BCE, Caesar's reinforcements arrive in Alexandria, drive off the siege and meet the armies on the Nile. Ptolemy XIII drowns in the Nile. Arsinoe IV is taken prisoner. Cleopatra VII and Ptolemy XIV become co-rulers of Egypt together. Caesar has a son with Cleopatra called Caesarion and departs Egypt, leaving 3 legions of Roman troops in Egypt in order to secure Cleopatra's position. A year later, Cleopatra VII and Ptolemy XIV visit Rome. They are awarded legal status by the Senate and they are friend and ally of Rome by Caesar. 44 BCE, Caesar is assassinated and Cleopatra departs Rome for Egypt. A second triumvirate is formed in 43 BCE. Octavian, who is Caesar's nephew and also legal adopted son and heir. Mark Antony, Caesar's favourite general and personal friend. And Marcus Lepidus, who was a general and friend of Caesar. A year later, the triumvirate succeeds in hunting down the armies of the assassins who killed Caesar and totally destroys them. Octavian is given control of the western half of the Roman Empire. Mark Antony lands in Turkey with the intention of invading Parthia. Antony's forces drive the Parthians out of Syria and Anatolia. He then departs for Egypt in 41 BCE to get support and money to pay his armies. In 40 BCE, Antony gives Libya and Cyprus back to the control of the Egyptian state and Cleopatra VII. Antony and Cleopatra have 2 children, twins, and both are called Alexander. Antony departs Egypt to fight the Parthians in 40 BCE. Octavian and Antony divide the Roman Empire and they enter into a pact where Antony marries the sister of Octavian. She has 2 children with Antony. Both the children are called Antonia. A year earlier, the triumvirate between the three generals expired, and then it was extended in 33 BCE. Antony meets Cleopatra in Antioch to seek military support, supplies and troops for his planned attack on Parthia. Antony grants Cleopatra most of the Levant, which is Phoenicia, except for two towns which stay in Roman control, Judea, and half of the Nabatean kingdom. A new Ptolemaic era is declared in Egypt in 36 BCE. Cleopatra returns to Egypt and has a third child with Antony. He does like pulling it about a bit, doesn't he, Antony? That's 5 children he's got now. In 35 BCE, Antony is mauled and defeated by the Parthians and returns to Egypt. In 34 BCE, Antony returns to Armenia and defeats the Armenian king and returns to Egypt in triumph. Relations between Octavian and Antony sour. By 31 BCE, Antony and Cleopatra lose the Battle of Actium to Octavian's navy. A year later, Octavian invades Egypt. Antony commits suicide. Caesarion is murdered, and Cleopatra VII either commits suicide or is murdered. The rest of the children are sent back to Rome for re-education. By 27 BCE, Octavian had become the first emperor of the Roman Empire. He's granted the status of emperor for all of the provinces outside of Rome, but not emperor of Rome. The Ptolemaic era of 275 years has come to an end in Egypt. Egypt is now the personal estate of Caesar. This had to end in a tragic circumstances. The world changed from a Hellenistic one to a Roman one, and I think she did a good job. She only lived for 39 years. Mark Antony lived until he was 58, so he got the better deal out of the partnership. But sooner or later, Rome was going to take Egypt for their own. It's only a matter of time. So 275 years of Ptolemaic rule in Egypt. What was life like for the native Egyptian under Ptolemaic rule? Well, land resources were harnessed, and the Greeks introduced a new wheat to Egypt, the durum wheat, which has a higher gluten and more protein in the wheat to replace the emmer wheat, which was harsh and of low protein. There were scientific advancements during this period in mathematics and mechanics and physics and geography and medicine, but very few native Egyptians enjoyed any of this wealth. Most of the wealth was put into the Ptolemaic war machine. This resulted in riots in Egypt. We saw riots and uprisings in Upper Egypt, and Upper Egypt was mainly engaged in farming. So the peasant farmers weren't doing too well at all under the Ptolemaic era. The Ptolemaics did respect the traditions of the ancient Egyptians and the religious orders, but they used it to their advantage to control the masses. In comparisons to the old, middle and new kingdoms, the investment in religious buildings was not as significant as previous kingdoms. When Ptolemy VIII went to Upper Egypt during the Civil War, he recognized that the native Egyptians were not as well off as the Greeks. He tried to address this by appointing native Greek-speaking Egyptians into the bureaucracy. Ptolemy VIII also started to repair the temples and keep the temples in good upkeep. When the Romans walked into Egypt and took over, not much change for the native Egyptian. Now they were going to feed Rome. So overall, for the native Egyptian, having the Ptolemaic period was no good to them at all. All the Ptolemies did was go to war and use all the vast resources that Egypt produced in the way of food and papyrus and oils and gold, all went into a war machine. Now, if you like this content, please press your subscribe button, thumbs up, and I'll see you real soon. Bye for now.